Hi there, and welcome to the Painted Lady Coaching by Amanda Douglas. I'm Amanda Douglas. I'm your healing bestie, ready to help you alchemize your trauma and reclaim your identity and help you have more healthy and fulfilling relationships. Today's topic is going to be about PTSD or complex PTSD after narcissistic abuse. So, PTSD or cPTSD is a very common outcome of people who have endured a toxic or narcissistic relationship. And just to clarify on the difference between PTSD and cPTSD, PTSD is more so the clinical diagnosis for it. cPTSD is not an official diagnosis, but it is recognized. And the difference being is that PTSD, they typically refer to it as like a singular isolated event, whereas complex PTSD is repeated exposure and repeated events of trauma and abuse. So essentially just prolonged abuse like narcissistic abuse and emotional abuse. Recovery and living a healthier and happier life is entirely possible, and we'll provide some information and tips on dealing with complex trauma after narcissistic abuse in this video. So how complex trauma might look like after dealing with narcissistic abuse. It can kind of vary from person to person, but it will generally be along the lines of flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, and intrusive thoughts. Feeling like you're on edge, or maybe like you're waiting for something bad to happen, or like the other shoe to drop. When you're a survivor of narcissistic abuse, you may have like a heightened startle response, and you may have a hard time trusting your own emotions and perception of things. cPTSD can have additional symptoms and more complicated symptoms like difficulty regulating emotions, feelings of worthlessness, and like a sense of guilt or shame. Prolonged exposure to many of the tactics that narcissists and toxic people employ on their given targets, it can just cause a very much disturbed and dysregulated nervous system. It's very common that people that leave these type of dynamics, that they are constantly living in like a state of fight or flight, and they may have like constant panic attacks or anxiety, emotional exhaustion, things of that nature. So it's a very normal and like trauma-driven response. And with healing and intentional work, you can regulate the nervous system back to a healthier baseline. Some practical grounding techniques to help when you are feeling like a heightened sense of anxiety. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. I know a lot of people have heard of this one. It's actually quite helpful. Identifying 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Deep breathing exercises. Box breathing is a good one, or just really intentional inhale and like long exhale, and progressive muscle relaxation. It's like tensing and releasing different muscle groups throughout your body just to release the tension. And another one that I kind of liked to do with myself is I would count backwards by 3s. And sometimes I would maybe change it up by like how many numbers I'm counting by backwards, just because it's encouraging your brain to think a little bit more. Oftentimes when we are in this state of overwhelm, our front center of our brain, where logic and thinking is happening, it kind of just goes offline. So in order to bring that back online, we engage with like some logical brain exercises that are just very minimal. So doing things like identifying things with your senses, or to count like that, or even like listing off certain things. That does help kind of bring your brain back online. Another thing is like creating a safe space for yourself and making sure that you are ensuring your sense of safety in ways that you can. That includes maybe setting up your home space in a way that feels inviting and safe and cozy for you, having supportive friends, and like a therapeutic relationship, whether that be like support groups or a therapist or a coach. And of course, I think this is a given, but we'll say it anyway, like removing any sort of like reminders of the relationship or your abuser, whether that be like photos or clothing or gifts or anything of that nature. Because This can be triggering, or it can just kind of keep you in an emotional loop, whatever that may be. And even building like self-care routines that create a sense of safety for you, like in the morning or in the evening, are perfect as well. Like one of my favorite things to do was like a morning meditation on the beach. Like I would have my coffee and I would write and meditate and do some light stretching, and that was really one of the best parts of my day in the morning. And then in the evening, I had my little witchy altar by my bed, and I had like photos of my loved ones and just little like mementos and candles as well. I would light my candles, I would meditate, stretch, all of the fun things in the evening, and as I would wind down and get ready for bed, and even light some Palo Santo or like incense or, you know, whatever I had on hand at the time. And it really did help create a sense of like safety, and I was connecting with myself, and like these were things that made me feel really good. And also like building that trust with yourself again, which of course we know, being with a narcissistic or toxic individual, they break down your sense of self-trust and make you also doubt yourself as well. So, and again, journaling, affirmations, those were some of my favorite things during this time, and I'm telling you, they are one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself as well. And also celebrating all of your wins, even the small ones. And like, I understand it's like really easy to kind of brush it off and play it off or think it's not enough, but I don't care. Like, be happy about it anyway. Make a big deal about it, journal about it, phone a friend about it, something. And of course, with boundary work and setting boundaries and standing on your boundaries, that's also going to be important to your recovery. Limit contact with like toxic individuals or people that may have contact with your abuser and maybe friends with your abuser. Say no to shit that just drains your emotional energy, and say yes a lot more to your self-care and your rest. Practice setting your boundaries clearly and calmly, and surround yourself with people who respect those boundaries. And I'm not going to stop saying it. If you get any pushback, take note of that. And again, your healing journey does not have to be something that you embark on alone. Build your support systems, work with therapists who understand trauma and even narcissistic abuse, and even working with a coach like myself who understands narcissistic abuse and toxic relationship dynamics, and rebuilding from that and healing from complex trauma. Support groups, online or in person, doesn't matter, can also be super helpful. And whatever works for you and whatever you prefer is perfect. Having a safe space where you can express your experiences and have like sounding boards and just people who are going to help you feel seen, heard, understood, and validated are very important, especially during this time while you are still going through it and recovering. And again, your self-care is going to be very important during this time, especially when it comes to recovering from complex trauma. Again, adopting mindfulness was very, very, very important to me during this time. My creative outlets as well. I got into digital art a little bit more. I wrote a lot of poetry during this time, and even managed to put together a book during that time, and even working on music a little bit here and there. All of this helps to kind of process emotions and are very wonderful and healthy outlets. And movement is also going to be great. Some low impact movement is great for releasing trauma and stuck energy in the body, and I couldn't recommend it enough. So things like yoga and like somatic yoga, walking around in nature and getting your body moving in general, and even things like Pilates, maybe that's like another like dope but like relatively low impact way of getting exercise and movement. All wonderful ways to do that. And as always, practice patience and self-compassion, because healing is not linear. And of course, this is also a great time when you're recovering, this is a great time to redefine what healthy relationships look like and to have a better understanding of what that looks like. So when working with a therapist or a coach, they will most likely guide you and focus on building healthy and secure attachments with you, whether that be in friendships, family, or romantic dynamics. And while also working along with a professional, grabbing workbooks or books on the topic can also be very helpful. And even like YouTube videos such as this from good resources can be amazing as well. So triggers, again, very common when developing complex trauma, and those can include certain behaviors, words, or even places. I was really surprised to find some of the things that did end up triggering me like after leaving this person, because it was like very unexpected things that came out of nowhere, and it was even like just triggered like the behavior that happened around being triggered sometimes was not like what I would have expected either. For example, when I got with my now husband, we were just dating at the time, and I would have thought that this was, long enough after my relationship had ended. One time I woke up to my husband having he had like a cramp in his foot. It was like a Charlie horse or something like that in his foot. And I was just like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, no problem. I just have a Charlie horse in my foot. I'm just trying to like stretch it out." And I like sprung into action like something was after me, and just to kind of help him with whatever that was. And my husband just thought like it was kind of like an inappropriate response to what was happening. He's like, "I'm fine, I'm just stretching it out." And I'm like, "Yeah, but like I know how to help you." He's like, "Yeah, but you just seem so like hurried and like you were panicked about it." And the reason being is because my abusive ex would just absolutely wake me up yelling just for me to do something about it, and would yell at me more if I wasn't moving quick enough or anything like that, even though I was just dead asleep. Him just saying that, "Oh yeah, I have a Charlie horse in my leg or in my foot," whatever it was, it just absolutely triggered my nervous system and my brain just to start moving as quickly as possible to get him something to help him. Because like allegedly mustard helps with like easing Charlie horses. I don't know how valid that is, but apparently that was the case. And every time that I got screamed at out of my sleep, I was ordered to get some mustard. So that's what I did for my husband, and he's just like, "Okay, weird." And I don't remember if it worked or not for my husband, but my husband was more just like, "Why did you react like that?" And just the reason being is because I had been yelled at out of my sleep every time that happened. So yeah, some ways that we can cope with triggers: journaling about them. And again, I have that method for it, which is trigger, emotion, story, the story that we're telling ourselves around the trigger, and the behavior that we're doing along with the trigger. And a lot of this can teach us about what is the underlying issue within the trigger, like what is the underlying thing that needs to be addressed within the trigger. It's a very empowering tool that I definitely encourage everyone to use to really sit with and analyze their triggers to help with them having less of an impact on our lives. And mindfulness, using mindfulness techniques to remind us that we are in a safe space and the abuses in the past and no longer happening right here in the right now. And of course, like the sensory grounding techniques that were mentioned before, other great tools to use. And as I said, with like logging your triggers and journaling about your triggers with the, trigger, emotion, story, and behavior, it's a great thing to do to log them, so that way you can also work with your therapist or your coach to set up an action plan, and even like just go through them and assess it and analyze it and just work together to work on them. Healing from complex trauma is definitely doable and possible, even if it does feel exhausting and overwhelming and possibly like an endless loop. Your trauma does not define you, and you definitely have the power to rebuild and live your life on your terms. You've survived the absolute hardest part, and now it's time to reclaim your peace and your identity and start living your best life. But now I want to hear from you. I want to hear your experiences and your questions and any coping strategies that you might have as well We're all in a safe space and here to help each other. If you liked this video, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and share so that way this can reach more people who also need to hear this information while they're on their healing journey. I also do one-on-one coaching, and I have free consultations to see if we might be a good fit to work together. If you're interested in that, check the link in the description. And with that, I'm really glad you're here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye.